All right. Countries have begun to evacuate their citizens from Sudan, a country which was thrown into crisis on the 15th of April amidst the clash between the Sudan army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. For the federal government, about 40 buses have been deployed to evacuate at least 2,400 stranded Nigerians out of Sudan to Cairo, Egypt, after which they will be airlifted to Nigeria. Although the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces agreed to a ceasefire at midnight Monday, there have been reports of fighting which has claimed more lives. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, has urged stranded Nigerians to be calm and assures them of safety. Well, joining us in the studio is the chairman of the Guild of Public Affairs Analysts of Nigeria, Enugu State Chapter, Ambrose Igboke. Good to see you, Ambrose. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine. Good morning, sir.
Ambrose, time is ticking. And so far, if you look at the papers this morning, there are reports coming from the students that out of the 40 buses that the government put together, it is only 15 that is ready, that has, transported about 750 of them to Cairo. Are we making judicious use of the time that we have on our hands with this ceasefire?
Well, first of all, I think there's no ceasefire again. The 72-hour window that was given has been broken. Well, ceasefire that was brokered by United States Secretary of State Blinken has been broken, just barely 24 hours as it started. Nigeria wasted a lot of time. Just maybe we're looking on to God to help us evacuate our people. Other countries last week made frantic efforts to move their people out, and a lot of them succeeded. The diplomatic communities, especially countries of the West, like the United States, France, and some other countries, airlifted. Even Italy, did some airlifting of their diplomats while we were still planning. So countries that were serious have airlifted. They came in there and airlifted. As at weekend, we're still talking about we are planning. National Emergency Management Agency was still planning. So until they said they were going to evacuate on Tuesday, and the ceasefire was supposed to start on Monday. Barely Tuesday, it started again. The war started. And then when our country were talking about airlifting, we were talking about using buses to move our own people to the neighboring country, Cairo, Egypt, and then move. It's not tidy. And then look at the humongous budget that was slated for moving 40 buses. I wonder whether they are manufacturing new buses. Because
they said it's because of security reasons.
I mean, that comes to like $30,000 per bus.
Yeah.
If I do 40 buses.
They blamed it on security reasons.
No, I mean, that is a lot of money to even charter airplanes. Even if you want to engage Warren mercenaries or Wenger mercenaries from Russia, I don't think it can cost that much. So that comes to double down on what we say as a country. There's always lack of emergency plans are supposed to be something that you have put in place that will just trigger off when emergencies come. It's not what you start planning when emergencies arrive. And that is, look at last year, flood wiped out so many states in Nigeria.
I was trying to come to that. That when we're discussing the flood thing, we were saying that in each of these states, they have emergency
management agencies.
Yes. They don't give them any money. They don't have any money. They just put them there and they give them money to pay salaries. They don't have a budget. The point is, why would you be releasing $1.2 million if you already have, if NEMA was ready? If NEMA is supposed to have that money in his kitty and say, okay, this thing has happened. EPIS, can you help us? Dena, can you help us? And so, can you help us? Please let us shut down temporarily some of your flights in Nigeria. Get this, go to Sudan, go to Khartoum, and get our people out of there.
While other countries were doing
it. And then you notify the embassy, and the embassy makes an announcement through the waves, the cartoon, and say, all Nigerian citizens be at so place at so time for evacuation. That is what other countries have done.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
That's what they have done. And, it comes to play how we operate as a country. We always knee-jerk approaches, fire brigade approaches. We are not ready. You can see even the election, see the way it was done. So we need to, as a country, be intentional about how we want to live our lives.
One would have expected that we would have learned lessons from what happened in Ukraine, because we are finding ourselves in a similar situation again. But it seems we never learned from anything.
Well, Nigeria never learns. We remember we are still trying to define to third after 1983 election. In 2023, we are still asking whether Abuja was part of the to third and plus, and we are still trying to define what is and plus after what the courts did in 1983. So, do we really learn as a country? We don't, because we are not intentional about development of our institutions that guide us. We build our lives around personalities, especially public officers. And when the person goes, then the flash goes with the person. It happened in NAFDAC. It happened in some other places. Now, Mara is in NDLEA, and they are making arrests, so it's all activity. And Ribadu was in EFCC, it was all activity. So when those people exit, what happens? So it seems to go back to our share. So we have not built institutions. And it's only when you build institutions that will be ready for this kind of, a country will now be planned and walk through the plan. So when it comes to this emergency, for example, what America did, what France did, and other people, was just to activate the emergency signal. And then, because it was already in place, it was easy to move in. By weekend, we sat down, we didn't do anything. We were enjoying Salah break while our people were stranded in Khartoum. It was after Salah, we now say, oh, can we lift them? And then we had to wait for a Federal Executive Council meeting to allocate a budget for an emergency just yesterday.
We're enjoying Salah break when those people needed Salah break.
Salah break. So,
I don't know you get what I'm saying.
And then did we need to wait for Federal Executive Council meeting to approve $1.2 million? Just as Sam has painted, that there was no money. And then you have to wait for a meeting of the Federal Executive Council to approve money. And then you approve the money, you cannot mobilize even the buses. And then where are you going to move them through? What kind of security are you providing? What's the corridor? What's the safe corridor to move them to Egypt? Do we even have the head count of Nigerians living in Sudan?
There have been conflicting figures.
No, we don't even have it. The figures are just being bandied around for the sake of banding. We don't have it. Even in organized crimes like United States and United Kingdom, we don't even have these figures. So do we even know our figure, those of us living at home? So we are talking of those in diaspora. So we need a kind of paradigm shift from the way we do things so that we can align with best practices in governance and the way we live our life. If we don't, then the indices of development will actually be always where we have left us behind.
Is it not a paradox that a society like us that is always prone to emergency, we don't know how to handle emergency, and societies in the West that don't really have emergencies,
they know how to handle it.
They know how to handle the emergencies.
Yeah, it's because
our life, maybe it's because our life is...
We are used to fire brigade approach.
It's an emergency.
No, our life is an emergency. So there's no need. So let us just accept it. We cannot do anything. We cannot create a situation to solve our emergency, because even the situation of solving the emergency itself is an emergency.
Because the basic things of life, if you cannot get it right, your infrastructure, your roads, your traffic, your health, your education, those are the simple parameters of simple livelihood. If you cannot even get that correctly, you cannot get emergency correctly. So if you cannot evacuate people when flood ravaged Kogi State and Nasarawa and some other states, you cannot evacuate Nigerians in Sudan.
Do we really know? Do we have a situational or I would say local definition of what emergency is?
I don't think we don't.
Nigeria,
we don't.
Don't you think you need to? If we really define emergency, all the money in Nigeria will be budgeted for emergency. Because I'm talking to you, there's an emergency going on.
Yes. There's an emergency.
But what do you think that the government should have done if we were to address this head on and give it that sense of urgency that a lot of Nigerians have been talking about?
There have been signals of this war, I think, for the past 3 weeks, or let's even, for the benefit of the doubt, for the past 4 weeks. There have been the signals. Countries have been monitoring. Countries have been preempting. And then when the war now broke out fully, emergency response were immediately activated.
Yeah.
Because you need to do a prognosis of where they are going with the war, and you can see that they're all ripe and boiling. At that boiling point is when you are supposed to now activate. Immediately the war started, you move out your citizens. So the Nigerian embassy in Khartoum was supposed to have been on standby since like 3 weeks ago, and this like what Sam suggested about talking to Nigerians, telling them to assemble a kind of muster point for emergency evacuation would have been activated like 2 weeks ago. And then when countries actually moved in, even if we didn't have the capacity to move in, some other countries latched onto the other countries' arrangements. There's one country in Europe that couldn't move its citizens. I think it's latched on with the Italian government to help evacuate its own citizens. I think Israeli or something. Some other countries. So we could have made that arrangement. Maybe, for example, with the UK or with America or with another country that is a friendly country. It's okay. Can you help us move our own citizens? Even if you're not moving them to Nigeria for us, can you help us evacuate them to Cairo where we can take off a pickup point? So these are things we would have done immediately if we didn't have that gamut of emergency. So we didn't do that. And then we wasted too much time doing nothing. Even if we had started planning when it started, then we would have moved on faster. But as I speak, they have not been able to mobilize the vehicles that will move these people out of Sudan. And that goes to show us how we take governance in this climate in Nigeria. We have not taken it with all sense of emergency it deserves. Emergency of this nature, yet we are doing meetings, waiting for instructions from one director, waiting for budget approval from the Federal Executive Council. What's the business of Federal Executive Council approving $1.2 million? So these are the kind of charade we do as a country, and then we are laughing stock in the Committee of Nations. Then who takes us seriously? How do you not take the life of a Nigerian serious in a foreign country when our own country is exhibiting total indifference to our own welfare anywhere we find ourselves in any part of the world? So that is the shift here.
We asked Ukraine to even warn us.
Yes. There was Ukraine. Our students were stranded there. Yes. I mean, it was so recent. So we're not even supposed to. This was just last year.
That was why I asked the question earlier. Are we learning lessons?
It was so recent. No, Nigeria never learned lessons. That is I think that become a cultural disease.
That
for
is
us.
The lesson.
We never learned.
Because it begs the question of what is the job of the persons that we send to these countries as emissaries we have embassies in some of these countries, yet we're having situations like this, and we cannot really step up the plate to address these matters, the safety of Nigerians in such countries.
Some of our embassies, when you go there, you want to weep as a Nigerian. They are so ill-equipped. The staff, I mean, no funding is very poor. Apart from maybe salaries that they pay in dollars and they pay in foreign currencies to them and the others, funding the place particularly is a sorry sight. So they are incapacitated most of the time, just like most of our institutions are incapacitated back home. So, there's an English saying that always says charity begins at home. Mm-hmm. What you cannot get it right at home, you can't get it right outside home. So despite the infrastructure development in advanced countries, Khartoum is not, Sudan is not an advanced country. So even Ukraine, where we had, opportunities, our people were trekking miles inside snow, our Nigerian students. So we couldn't even activate it there. And they had internet to cry out, they were shouting, individuals had to, make plans to evacuate their own children. Even in the current earthquake in Turkey, I know a family friend who had to evacuate her daughter from Turkey. This earthquake that happened this year.
Yes.
Single-handedly. The girl is back in Nigeria now as we speak. So these are kind of emergencies that if you depend on government, you cannot. Our children are being kidnapped. People are being kidnapped, paying ransom.
That's why I say we have emergencies
everywhere. Paying ransom. So those are emergencies that we cannot even tackle at home. So you don't expect, the embassies are handicapped when it comes to this kind of situation.
I'd like to know, I don't think there's been some reporting about when did the embassies cry out? What was the communication between Abuja and the embassy in Khartoum?
Yeah.
You know, the embassies are treated like civil servant kind of thing. You really cry out. You write a memo. And until a guy in Abuja answers your memo in foreign office, the foreign affairs ministry, you know, this is how these things work. So it's a ministry thing. You write your memo, you start waiting for a guy to respond. So you can't do a press conference, you can't shout out, you can't cry out. So that is how it has been run. It's
like a Kafkaesque experience. You want to enter the house, you spend all the time trying to enter the house. Morning till night, you see they try to enter the house.
Especially
when you enter one room, you enter another room, you are still looking for the house.
That is if it's a normal house. What if it's a burning house? So in this case, it's a burning house. So what happens to the house? It gets burnt down because you're not even able to access to do anything in terms of trying to ameliorate the fire situation. So that is what it means. So, and you know, the worst thing is that we don't even know in case there are casualties in terms of fatalities and all that.
Government said nobody
has, no,
there is no casualty. That's
how will you know whether there's casualty or no? We don't even know the number of your citizens in that country. We don't know the number of our citizens there. And if somebody from another country hops in and says, I'm in Nigeria, we can't even identify.
This experience has political implications. The story in Sudan is a story of democracy that went, or the search for democracy that went haywire. There was al-Bashir, who was the head of the country, dictator that ruled the country for many years. And then there was an outcry, you know, led by medical doctors and so on, that the government should go. Then it's the man who, Baram, or how do you call his name, the head of the army, he took over, and he was supposed to hand over to civilians. He said, no, I wouldn't do that. And he was supposed to share a situation with the rapid support
power sharing
arrangement. And this one said, well, I own this gold, I own that agricultural land. This one say I own power. And say, okay, me and you not there for the same category. So everybody go fine. Now, you know, there's a classification for us in Nigeria here when some people are calling for army to come back, and this should be some kind of cautionary tale for those who are saying interim government, we want soldiers and so on. Since this is the situation.
Yeah, that's the situation. And when you trace the history of the conflict in Sudan, you find out it started in the 50s.
Yes.
And then there was a kind of a treaty among them for peacetime, 1972. That lasted till 1983. And then when they now came back, there was relative peace. That's what translated to Omar Bashir coming in. And then in the 90s, there was some simmer of conflict and the rest. Later, in the millennium, it sprang up again, which led to the creation of South Sudan. You know, that time, it was the north, mostly Christian part.
It was Muslim
and
South.
So it was like a religious war. You can see that it's still the political people that were, you know, just like what is happening in Nigeria.
Playing up religion. Sentiments.
So it was South Sudan, Christian against Muslims. That was what was happening in Sudan, Northern Sudan. And now, Southern Sudan has got their independence a few years ago. So it's gone. Now there's no religious card to play anymore.
So they are fighting themselves. So those of them are saying that, let us cut away. We have peace. So I was saying in a meeting yesterday that when you say, want to cut away, we have peace. It is then you will know that there's trouble. There's one man in my church when I was growing up, Adedoku, he used to say, he said when you don't marry wife, enter house, finish. Now na two go know who person they get. You say, I embody this, get body odor. It is then you know that, no, I'm not like that spoiled people. I'm not like them. Get the way that they talk, like their food, the way that they do their food not good. They fight. They can't discover that there's trouble.
Yes, of course.
They discover that the umbrella body will no longer, you're going to have different holes inside. The rain will fall inside, and then you throw away the umbrella.
Another part of it is this issue of third parties and external forces.
Yes.
You know, when you live in peace, among yourselves, with the different shades of differences you have, you are still an entity that have been living together for hundreds of years. Even when there were sovereign traditional entities, when the Oba of Benin was a sovereign king, when the Alaafin of Oyo was a sovereign king, and the rest, we lived together, we traded together, we worked together, and then we were intermarried that time. Until the amalgamation, we have been living. External people kept on telling, look, you are not supposed to be this, you are not supposed to be that, and then it starts coming in. The hand of external people, this war, some schools of thought are saying that the war happening in Ukraine is like it's repeating itself in Sudan. Now, Ukraine wants to join NATO. Russia says no. And then the West, led by America, is pushing it to join NATO. I think the same thing is playing out, because some schools of thought are saying that Russia wants to build a military base in Sudan. And America doesn't like that. And last week, even Blinken warned that even they are concede to the fact that Sudan is a sovereign nation, but they should not allow Russia build those bases, because it's going to have what they call consequences. Now, some people are saying, while the speech is going on, the consequences have started.
Absolutely.
The Wagner Group is doing a mining business in Khartoum. Khartoum, in Sudan. Sudan is sitting on a lot of wealth, gold, and so many minerals, agricultural. It's on the Nile, it's on the Red Sea. So it has everything that they want. They have all the resources. It's just like Nigeria. We have all the resources. You plant, put anything for Nigerian soil, go grow. We have all the resources.
What we don't
have, resources we don't have is here. We don't have the heart to live together.
The will, yes.
Exactly.
The will.
The will to work
because
together.
We have the human resources.
That Sudan should be a cautionary tale to Nigerians to see how a country can come down. Look at Southern Sudan now. It is like, okay, you are Christian and Christian. So let us fight it. There's no Muslim now in this our fight. Now in the north, both the RI, that one is a Muslim, the one in the army, they are all Muslim. They are fighting each other.
So it's not a religion. The problem is not religion.
They cannot say it's religion
The problem is not religion. Anywhere, the problem is not always religion. Because it's claimed to say that it's one God that we are serving. So it cannot be. It cannot be.
Now, there are concerns that this war could consume the region because of what is at stake. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I see it. Sudan is a very large country. It's a very large, even though they have split into Southern, but it's still a large country. Any refugee crisis in Sudan, because what will happen now, countries are evacuating, it will remain the Sudanese. The war, if it intensifies, then they will start running too. So what we start having is continental refugees. So they will go, and the only country wedging us, I think, between Nigeria and is Chad. So once they enter from that Maghreb region, they will just come to the northern Nigeria. And from there, they will spill over. Remember the Chadian crisis we had, where we had a lot of Chadian refugees here in the 80s and the rest. Remember that even we had Ghanaians here, who the refugee crisis, that was triggered by economic war. I get to the point now. Then this war in Sudan will trigger off, they will start moving down, and all parts of Africa, and then we'll have serious refugee crisis in our hands. And once you start having that, economy will start dwindling. There will be inflation in those countries because they were not planned for. There will be security risk. There will be health crisis. So a lot will happen to Africa, and it will lead further to the destabilization of the continent in all ramifications. So Africans should come together and see what happens. I have advocated in one of my earlier outings that if Africa is serious, this is time to put boots on ground. I mean, Sudan deserves the Liberian treatment. When we had ECOMOG. And we didn't leave it to the whims and caprices of the warring factions because we have left them for too long. And they were trying to destabilize the West African region. And we came up with ECOMOG. Boots were on ground, and we stopped the war in Liberia, even the one that was emerging in Sierra Leone. We stopped them. So, but African Union now, after Gaddafi, I don't know what has become of it. It's like a shadow of itself. If they have that resources or even the willpower to be able to mobilize a EU troop to enter to or UN troop, there should be a kind of synergy between the AU and UN to see if they can actually send troops and deal with the situation there.
This thing has created some kind of a sense that Nigerians love to school everywhere. Not many people knew that Nigerians were in Sudan. Because somebody say, what did Nigerians they go do for Sudan? Nigeria everywhere. You see, Nigerians are very adventurous. They want to learn. They want to, they want to get what they call the golden fleas and so on and so forth.
To dodge our
because we cannot even we don't have enough room for Nigerians to go to school here, especially universities.
Right.
It looks like once again it has exposed the inadequacies of our tertiary policy.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
All right. We'll have to leave the conversation here now. Ambrose Igboke, we must thank you, Chairman of the Guild of Public Affairs Analysts of Nigeria Enugu State Chapter, for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming.
See you once more. Live in the studio.